This is the Khoodeelaar television channel being broadcast on the internet at 0100 hours GMT on Monday. This is the day, Monday, the 7th of October 2024, when the main newspaper headings, at least in Fleet Street in London, the Financial Times, the I newspaper, the Daily Telegraph, and the Times all use the term oust or ousted about Sue Gray having resigned from the post as the chief of staff of the regime fronted by the political murderer of the Labour Party, Keir Starmer. Of course, she has been given a new position created for her by Starmer as the ambassador for the nations and regions. It's very much like creating a post for somebody called the minister without portfolio or minister without a portfolio. This was coming. I mean, there was no way that Sue Gray could remain in post as the chief of staff in the regime fronted by Keir Starmer. And the early reports, as seen on the BBC website, link this with two or three things. One is that there were senior civil servants in the Downing Street operation who were prepared to leak information about the fact that Sue Gray was getting paid more than Keir Starmer. And the other thing that has been linked with her is that she was the one that had authorized the pass to Wahid Ali, the pass to the Downing Street precincts. These are only tips of the iceberg. The actual venom against Sue Gray has come not just from these unknown, unnamed sources, but it's actually the Conservative Party, because this is the main target that could be felled by the Conservatives so that they could claim some sort of victory against the regime fronted by whoever, the Labour Party, whether it's Keir Starmer or anybody else. The second related question is, this shows that Keir Starmer is vulnerable. And I predict Keir Starmer will not last the course. Keir Starmer will resign because of the pressure, not because the number of members of parliament demanding his removal would not be enough, because the majority of members of parliament elected at the 4th of July 2024 is too big. So it will be the emotional pressure that will exert itself. And the other thing, as I've said previously in previous editions, is the line being promoted by GB News. GB News is a racist far-right operation representing Nigel Nasty Farage and Boris Johnson et al. They are saying, well, they are manufacturing a kind of scenario where it can be eventually shown that Keir Starmer's private life has been kind of shielded from scrutiny, because they are suggesting, insinuating so far, only insinuating, that he has had, or he is still in adulterous relationships with outside persons outside his marriage, obviously. So this will become something of a distraction, to use the word that Sucre has used as the reason for her resigning, because she said that she became a distraction. So Keir Starmer's next distraction would be his personal life, and it may kind of erupt at any time. The fact that the newspapers are mainly leading with Sucre's resignation rather than about the massacres continuing, the massacres by the Zionist State of Israel, massacres of the Arabs and Muslims, both in Palestine and in Lebanon, and probably in Iran because of the various incursions that the Zionist state is making. Now, the question is, who is arming the Zionist state to mount these multiple military murders, massacring attacks against so many destinations? So this will be something that the British papers, including the Guardian, they are not raising the question, but that is what will have to be the question. And I think, I mean, if the events of exactly a year ago, today, 7th of October 2023, the events of the 7th of October 2023 was something that took the Israeli state operations by surprise. I think most of the observers in the world were also taken by surprise. Only, as I say, most, only the closest of sources that were in contact with the media outlets knew that some kind of the event will happen. But most of the observers didn't. Now, if that is extrapolated, then the promotion of Israel's Zionist state repeatedly mounting, massacring attacks on the Palestinians on Gaza and outside of Palestine this last week. And as this broadcast goes, currently this minute, the boosting of the image of Israel as invincible is bound to be shattered. Quite which source will come to shatter that is not something I can name, but it is bound to happen, one or the other, because Israel is surrounded by targets that it wants to destroy. Israel is the frontage that is representing America, Britain, France, Germany, etc. All the Zionist forces across the world want to destroy the states, societies, communities in Arabia. And it's the Crusader continuing the Crusader agenda. So Israel is not as different from the mythology that the Zionists have been created for the last 80 years. Israel is not a state for the Zionist Jewish people. Israel is the frontage for the continuation of the updated colonial military anti-Muslim program to destroy the Muslim countries and to destroy the Muslim world. Back to the corruption in Keir Starmer's regime and the corruption perpetrated by Wahid Ali, and back to the situation in Tower Hamlets where the Wahid Ali corruption has included the funding of the crook, the Baroness of Bethnal Greed, thief Palauddin, who was lent £60,000 by Wahid Ali to repay to the public purse, which is only part of the money that she stole. Now, this actually takes this narrative, this commentary, to Brick Lane and the founding of the Spitalfields Housing Cooperative, which became material starting at the beginning of the 1980s. There has been a string of, if you like, claims and assertions about who actually contributed to the easing of the housing crisis that actually besieged the community in Tower Hamlets in the 1970s. That was a coincidence, along with the arrival in Tower Hamlets, mainly from Bangladesh. Siloti people, mainly families and dependents, arrived in the 1970s. And that actually created a localized crisis in terms of housing. And the reason why this was exacerbated, this crisis, was because of the virulent racist attacks that were going on. The racist attacks meant that most of the Bangladeshi arrivals in Tower Hamlets in the 1970s were unable to freely move, literally freely move in the local areas, local streets, in Brick Lane, in Whitechapel. And Brick Lane and Whitechapel are the main areas where the Siloti-speaking Bangladeshis were even visible. Even in Brick Lane, on the side streets, and in Brick Lane, racist thugs and criminals in broad daylight would physically push Bangladeshi local people. So it was very difficult for individual Bangladeshi males to venture out on their own individually. So it had to be always a group of Bangladeshis, male Bangladeshis, that would walk even in Brick Lane, in Fournier Street, in Hanage Street, in Hanbury Street, in Whitechapel Road. And it was in Whitechapel Road that in 1970, on the 4th of May, 1970, Altaf Ali was set up on by two anti-Bangladeshis and one white racist who was aided and abetted by a African-descended anti-Bangladeshi, anti-Muslim Asian criminal. So this is month of October, Black History Month. Looking at the history of the relationship between ordinary people of African Caribbean origin and the attitude towards the Asian people. It is quite clear that this is something that has been centrally used and exploited by white races who abuse the mental slaves, African origin or Caribbean, African origin, Caribbean descended individuals to mount attacks on Asians, which is exactly what happened with the case of the attack by the two on Altabali. Hey, this is just a reference to the absence of anything. Absence of anything that resembles a similar kind of celebration or event marking the presence in this country of the people of the subcontinent from Bangladesh, India, and Pakistan. And there is no solidarity, political solidarity at all, between the people of what they call African descent and Caribbean descent, if you like, African origin, Caribbean descended people. For example, this month, there have been this release of the books that I have referred to in the previous editions. For example, I'll come to refer to the handful of books that I have access to as I do this broadcast. Let me just check what I can get hold of. This this is the one that I have not referred to in the previous edition. This is the one. It's described as a Sunday Times bestseller, and the author is named as Reni, Reni, and this is a double barrel Edo, EDDO hyphen Lodge, LODGE, and the heading is Why I'm No Longer Talking About Race, and this is published by Bloomsbury. Now, Bloomsbury is a white publication. This is one, yeah. And the other one, which I did mention, which is heavily promoted by The Guardian, is an author called David Olusogo. I keep getting this second name slightly wrong. David Olusoga. And there is, of course, the other one that I did mention as well in the previous edition is one by a similar one called Akala. And let me just check if I can get my hands to touch this one, the other one. I can't find it because it's covered by other papers. Now, the summary of what I'm saying there is that these books are supposedly historical books exploring apparently the struggles of the mainly African origin demography in the United Kingdom against racism. But this is a misleading series as I meant when I said that the actual publications, well, if they're published by Bloomsbury is a white publication or white publisher, then by definition it is going to be partial, and it's not actually covering the truth or truthfully covering the real experience of Black people, of even African origin, Caribbean descended people. And so it's on three levels, it is incomplete and false and misleading. One is that it is not about fighting racism. It's about Black people existing, and Black people existing with the knowledge of slavery and so on from Africa and from the Caribbean, including the Wendrush generation and the various things that happened in the late 1940s. And when the British government became a Labour government fronted by Clement Attlee, Attlee was not interested in fighting discrimination, in fighting racism, in ending racism. Attlee was, just as Liz Kendall, the current Secretary of State for Wanton Poverty Creation, their nearest they come to talking about prejudice and discrimination is about the white working people, not about racism and racism related, racist kind of discrimination. So there is a lot of inadequacies in the so-called history books that are being published by mainly white publishers. Secondly, in the actual selection of these authors, they have selected people like David Olusoga and the other two or three because these are essentially mulatto thinking. And by mulatto thinking, I mean that mainly the parents are mixed parents, mixed races parents, a mixture being white mothers in the main and African origin fathers in the main. So the children have got mixed race mentality, not just the skin color, but the mixed race mentality actually seriously distorts the attitude and outlook and the understanding of the reality of what has been going on in the racist dominated society. And so therefore their selection of sources accordingly is defined by this mixed race mulatto mentality. In the indexes or indices, there is no presence, there is no reference, there is no recognition of the people in the United Kingdom fighting against racism. I've been fighting racism since before I physically arrived here. But physically, I have been fighting it for 6 decades. And I'm the most active members of anti-racism in the context of coming from South Asia subcontinent. And I'm nowhere mentioned in any of these books. And if they don't mention me, there is absolutely no way that they will mention anybody else. Because all the others combined are far, far away, far behind me. I'm the most active one. I have been the most active one for the last 6 decades, calendar decades, against racism. And I have included or tried to include various people from the Caribbean backgrounds, or the African backgrounds. But my efforts have been obviously not recognized by them, not reciprocated. It's not that I expected that reciprocation or recognition. But the demands of ethics and demands of evidence demand that this contribution that I've been making and I do make must be recognized for the picture to be truthful. But there is no truthful picture in any of these books and any of the materials. So, going back to the question of Wahid Ali and his lending the money to the thief, Paula Monzila Uddin, the Baroness from Bethnal Grede. I mean, he obviously was one of the intakes in the House of Peers by Tony Blair in 1998 when Paula Manzila Uddin was given the peerage. So when she became embroiled in the news, mainly news carried by the Times newspapers owned by Rupert Murdoch, and the House of Peers investigation decided that she owed the money to be returned to the public purse. She didn't obviously have the same amount of money in one place to return it to the public purse. So clearly, Wahid Ali, her mate or fellow recruitee to the House of Peers, or fellow depository or depositee, consignee in the House of Peers, came forward as he has been exposed in the recent weeks as being prone to come forward. So he gave £60,000, which is what the Times has revealed, and the Times has not been able to find any real information from her or from Wahid Ali whether she has returned the money to him. Now, this takes the battle again back to the Spitalfields housing cooperative and the housing crisis. Now, she was clearly manufacturing a housing crisis for the purpose of stealing the money from the kind of pot that is called the expenses. So she actually expenses her housing. I mean, she invented a housing in somewhere outside of London, whereas she was actually with her husband Komaruddin, living with her husband and children in a property that belonged to the Spitalfield Housing Cooperative. Now, this has been now what? More than 15 years since she became the subject of the investigation by the Times newspaper about the money she stole. And in all that time, the Spitalfields Housing Cooperative, or whatever else it is called by the criminals that control it now, has remained absolutely silent about all the implications and all the facts and all the evidence involving one of their residents, one of their tenants, residents, whatever, that is Falauddin. Now, if they have done that, if they have been able to stay silent and they are not being condemned by anyone, as far as I can see, anyone other than me, that is, I have been condemning them, of course, but I'm not talking about me. I'm talking about all the elected individuals as councillors, etc., or as mayors. For example, one mayor was the Labour Party Mayor John Biggs, who was in post for the 5 years during which Lutfur Rahman had to be banned by Richard Morey, the election commissioner. And she has been backed by Lutfur Rahman as well, because she appeared as a witness or character witness or a character referee before the election commissioner's hearings at the beginning of 2015. And when she gave the testimony, or attempted to give the testimony in certifying Lutfur Rahman as a person of good character, she was immediately brought down morally in bang in the middle of the hearing. She was effectively called a thief and she was totally instantly discredited. Now that happened, and everyone who is in any post, any position in the Spitalfields Housing Association or Cooperative should have known that or would have been made aware of that, and yet they have stayed silent. So all of these issues that are there in these silences are issues that will have to be kind of so there is no evidence that anyone who has been elected from any part of Tower Hamlets in the years since Paula Uddin became a feature of the news as a thief has made any comment whatsoever. How can that be possible? And the fact that she was openly condemned, very openly condemned as a thief and a liar during the proceedings before the election commissioner, Richard Morey, even that has not changed the behavior of any of the elected personnel or any of the unelected so called campaigners. I'm not including myself because I don't consider myself as a campaigner along with these people. Because if they are campaigners, then I should be something else. I should be morally, spiritually, ethically, legally of a very higher standard. And I should not be adequately represented by the word campaigner, which is used by crooks, colluders. Even the elected member of parliament, for example, Roshnara Ali, has appeared in several photographs with Paula Manzilauddin, the thief, effectively calling her political daughter. So, what does it say about Roshnara Ali's morality or ethics? So, these people are all supporting a crook and a thief. And of course, the channel S, the channel S for slaves. Channel S has given Paula Manzilauddin several times, several platforms, several opportunities to appear. And she has appeared, and various crooks that have been given platform by Channel S, the channel slaves, have praised her. What does it say about the whole? If these people constitute the truthful representation of the Bangladeshis or the Siletis, the Muslims in Tower Hamlets, then where are the truthful people? This is not right. This cannot be right. And yet this is being allowed to happen. And all the right wingers, criminals like the right wing commentators getting the platform in the Daily Mail, etc., praising Lutfur Rahman, because praising Lutfur Rahman serves them in the propaganda against the official Labour Party. Well, that is wrong, because the official Labour Party in Tower Hamlets, by staying silent about Lutfur Rahman's corruption and criminality, is doing exactly the same thing as the racists in Fleet Street and the Daily Mail praising Lutfur Rahman are doing. So they're all letting down the community as a whole, which means that the various decisions that are being made day to day by the local Tower Hamlets Council affecting people's lives and livelihoods and people's safety and security are being left unaccounted for, left unscrutinized, which includes the case of Shamima Begum. When they were first reported as having arrived past Turkey into Syria in February 2015, that is when I noticed their existence. I mean, that was the first time I noticed their existence. They were children. These girls, Shamima Begum and the other two, Amira Abbasi, and the other one, that all three of them were children. And they had been children throughout the period since the election in October 2010, the first time that Lutfur Rahman was elected as the executive mayor. These were children. And as they were children, they were entitled to be protected from all kinds of bad things as children under the safeguarding children duty, which Town Hamlets Council, in common with other councils, of course, owed to these children. And they have not been protected by Town Hamlets Council at all. Even after the disclosures, various disclosures that have happened in the intervening years now since February 2015, including the clear claim, that the East London Mosque was used as a site for grooming. One of the girls, not these three, but one of the girls known to these three, or at least known as being their contemporary, Sharmina, not Shamima, but Sharmina Begum, was brainwashed by two women belonging to what they call the Sisters Forum, which is a connection to the Islamic Forum in Europe that was based in the East London Mosque. And all the details have been various times edited and changed on the Wikipedia entries. But the fact remains that despite the editing and changing and alterations to the contents, Lutfur Rahman knew that, all the other councillors knew that, and yet they did not make one single word public statement about anything to do with these three children or anything to do with Shamima Begum, who has become the only surviving one of the three. The other two, reportedly so far, were killed by the Western kind of military states. But the point is that the safeguarding children duties remain. Those duties remain unfulfilled by Town Hamlets Council. And the consequences are being borne by these children, and the one that is now Shamima Begum. And so therefore, the community remains completely unrepresented, despite the fact that there are elected councillors, elected executive mayor, elected members of parliament. I'm talking about the elected frames. And you cannot begin to kind of express the amount of despair that exists about the behavior of those who are not even nominally accountable. The elected ones are nominally accountable, but the unelected ones are not accountable at all. And in fact, in the context of the events going on in Bangladesh, for example, most of the politics that exists among the politically active so-called members of the community in Town Hamlets that can be called of Bangladeshi origin, most of them who are active politically are aligned to political forces based in Bangladesh. For example, for the last 20, essentially 20 years, it has been the Awami League fronted by Sheikh Hasina. These politically active ones are also present among the elected members of the council, mainly from the Labour Party kind of card carrying Labour Party members. And they have been dishonest. They have been more concerned about what is going on politically in Bangladesh itself than in the UK based Bangladeshi community, like the children, the Shamima Begum and others. Although the origin is Bangladeshi, the political and social and constitutional legal entities are very different, which is what I have defined and updated regularly for the last 53 years. And I'm the definer, I'm the advocate for this, because the existential challenges faced by individuals day to day are only resolvable, only understandable, and the resolutions are only realizable by the distinction. They come from Bangladesh, but it's not a Bangladeshi framework, it's an UK based framework. This is something that has been undermined by the criminals who claim to be representing the UK Bangladeshis, but actually are loyal to the criminals in the political party or parties in Bangladesh itself. We shall be continuing updating on all of these, and of course, on Keir Starmer, on Wahid Ali, on Shamima Begum, and the discreditable role of the corrupt Tower Hamlets Council in due course in other editions.